Britain's presence in Egypt grew out of events following the revolt of Muhammad Ali in 1769 through 1849. So no, we are not talking about the boxer. Muhammad Ali was the Pasha of Egypt under the Ottomans, and he fought for the Ottomans in the Balkan Wars against Greece, but then he revolted against his own overlords for their failure to establish him as governor of Syria. And only the failure of his European allies to support him kept from toppling the Ottomans completely. And Muhammad Ali never successfully established Egypt as a power that could withstand European pressures. Although he attempted to implement westernized reforms in Egypt, competition from Western goods ultimately brought about the failure of his attempts to industrialize Egypt. Muhammad Ali insisted that Egypt attempt to increase its production of goods as cotton for export, leaving it vulnerable in the area of food production and dependent on its cotton exports for survival. After the construction of the Suez Canal transformed Egypt into a strategic location, competition among European powers for influence in Egypt became very intense. In 1882, the British occupied Egypt to ensure their access to the Suez Canal, which they essentially stole from the French by becoming major stockholders. And to the south, in the Sudan, rebellions emerged against both the corrupt Egyptian rulers and their British allies. The most significant of these was led by Muhammad Ahmed, who in 1881 called himself the Mahdi, or the Deliverer. He claimed to be appointed by Allah to lead the rebellion against the British intruders and the corruption of the corrupt Egyptian version of Islam. Although Mahdi died, it was not until a decade later that the British put down the revolt that was continued by his followers. And following their victory over the Mahdists in 1893, the way was clear for British domination of Africa. Now, the French in Asia. Christianity began to spread in Vietnam during the 19th century, and the ruling powers believed that Christianity posed a threat to their Confucian values and outlawed Christianity. When Christianity continued to spread, the Vietnamese began executing the missionaries, and then France retaliated by taking Saigon and 3 other provinces in the south of Vietnam between 1859 and 1860. A few years later, in the 1880s, they succeeded in conquering the rest of Vietnam, and then by 1887, French Indochina included Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and at that time, the only area of Southeast Asia that was not ruled by Europeans was Siam, which is present-day Thailand. In 1770, English Captain James Cook landed on Botany Bay, Australia, and the subsequent voyages of Captain Cook opened up Australia to European colonization. 1788, a group of migrants who were mostly convicted criminals settled in the colony of New South Wales, and the British argued that Australia was something called terra nullius, or land belonging to no one, and that could be seized and used by will. By 1900, their settlers had pushed the native Aboriginal population into reservations in regions that were mostly desert. When Europeans colonized the New World during the Age of Exploration, they brought smallpox and other diseases that devastated the native populations of New Zealand and Australia. The native Maori population of New Zealand dropped from about 200,000 to 54,000 within a century following the arrival of European timber traders in New Zealand in 1790. European firearms also created more tension among the warlike Maori people of New Zealand. The arrival and settlement of British farmers and herders in the mid-19th century eventually culminated in a series of wars from 1860 to 1864, after which the British forced the Maori onto reservations. Western education, however, gave some Maori the ability to fight for their rights, and the Maori continued to survive despite their near extermination.